Hello again. I've been talking to a couple of people this week about Paris-Brest-Paris. I know this is pretty specific, but the principles hold quite nicely, so I thought it'd be worth talking about the requirements and how you might approach it, and maybe you'd like to have a crack at it actually, PBP. It might seem like a big thing at 1200 kilometres in 90 hours, but I started working with somebody last year, and they hadn't done a lot of cycling, although they were pretty fit. They did some running, and they did London, Edinburgh, London this year, which is a similar sort of distance, and therefore, well, if you're into endurance cycling, maybe it's something you might have a crack at. And of course, if I can help you in any way, get in touch. So there are a couple of good websites. I'll link them below. There's an Apidura website, which is from a few years ago, not for this year. And then there's a site by Audax UK, which gives all the details of what you need to do to qualify for PBP. You have to qualify. So you have to do a 200 kilometre, 300 kilometre, 400 kilometre and a 600 kilometre Audax. And these all have to be in official events to be eligible for PBP. But actually, the series is quite a nice thing to target over the season. You can build up if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, you can build up as the weather improves. And get to the finish, in August or even September at the end of the season with your 600. Anyway, back to the PBP, Paris-Brest-Paris. The series that you have to do, they set specific dates, which is quite nice really, because it means that you can then create a framework about those dates to plan your training and build up your endurance. And the dates are, I've got it on a bit of paper here, so the 200 has to be between the 7th of January and the 30th of April. And the 300 has to be between the 11th of March and the 21st of May. 400 has to be between the 9th of April and the 10th of June. And the 600 has to be between the 6th of May and the 24th of June. So you have to have it all done and dusted by the end of June, which can be quite challenging because it's hard to get longer rides in the winter. It's not necessarily harder, but it's not as pleasant. The weather starts to improve, certainly in Britain, in around March and April, and similar for most places in the Northern Hemisphere. So you can get the long rides in, and if you train quite sensibly over the winter, train systematically, then you'll be in good shape to move things forward when the weather improves. If you're training for something like this, how do you approach it? Well, the thing is, you need to think about, well, what are you good at? What have you done in the past? If you've done it before, then you've probably got the endurance side of it fairly well taped, and you can then just really start focusing over the winter on building up a consistent base, build up your volume nicely to be able to do the longer Audaxes, do the series, but focus on building your FTP and maybe building your sort of power that you can sustain for a couple of hours and your sort of fatigue resistance. Whereas if you haven't done any long rides before, if these distances are quite challenging for you, then you really need to start working on the distance first. So it's no good just trying to build overall volume. It's better to focus on a nice weekly schedule where you're doing a few interval sessions, one interval session per week, and concentrate your weekends on building up your one long ride. And I would do that by having what I call an endurance stroke tempo ride. So you go out and you ride for a long duration, mostly at your endurance pace, but throw in a few tempo efforts on climbs, or if you ride into the wind, ride a little bit harder, so that you got a bit of variability, and that will give you some stimulus to improve your riding speed, your average riding speed, as well as building up your endurance. Because in the event itself, you're probably riding a bit slower than that, but being used to this variability, so that you push a little bit harder on hills and relax a little bit on the downhills, and just keep a nice comfortable pace on the flats, is a good way to get into the feel of a good sort of endurance pace. So that's for both things really. If you've got a good endurance base, or even if you're building the endurances, I would just have 2 harder sessions during the week that are focused on, one being this endurance tempo type ride, or the structured tempo if you would like to do tempo type intervals, and one harder session maybe on a Wednesday to give you enough time to recover from the weekend. And that might be a maximal aerobic, 5 by 5 minutes, 4 by 5 minutes, or something like that, or a threshold type session, 6 by 3 minutes with 1 minute recovery, building up to 3 or 4 or 5 by 6 minutes with 1 or 2 minutes recovery at around about your FTP. It's always best to have some intervals in your training, and just to keep the speed, keep used to working hard, but also it brings everything up. It makes you get faster, even for your endurance pace ride. It improves your economy as well. And then all the rest, I'd try and do as much volume as possible without compromising your hard sessions. All the rest should be at your training zones 1 and 2, your endurance zone and your what's known as your easy zone. And some people call it a recovery zone, but if you want to recover, you better go to bed and having a snooze. But just keep it low intensity, good low intensity volume, build that up, and a couple of interval sessions a week, and that's a great way to spend the winter and start really pushing the long rides once the weather starts to improve. So I know this can be quite complicated, so if you want a bit of help, get in touch. I mean, we just launched this group training plan, which is really good value, and it includes the one-to-one meetings, so you can discuss your training and get yourself on the right track, and it's pretty good value. So I've linked it below, you can check that out, and it'd be great to work with you. Anyway, and also if you find this useful and you want more this type, if you want to know a bit more detail about how I'd plan a training program for Paris-Brest-Paris, or a big ODAX or a bikepacking event towards the end of the year, the summer next year, around about August or even earlier, then get in touch, let me know specifically what you want me to talk about, and I'll do it. And if you want to hear more about my thoughts on PBP, because I'm coaching a few people already working towards that, subscribe and click the bell, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.